Camellia and Michaela walk ahead, with Lucian and Keie lingering behind. Every so often, Lucian makes a noise of awe, clapping. His sister simply just glowers off into the distance as they walk on the narrow dirt road, stone walls off to either side of them. Hills with stakes surround them, golden flowers blooming in the coastal wind. Mika, can I please shove bellflowers down his throat?
Duck, he has a pollen allergy. He'll die.
Lucian excitedly runs up to him, then thrusts out his hand, showing them a thimble.
Look! He just spun this! Isn't it wonderful? Oh, it's not that impressive. Like I said, I'm only borrowing.
Camellia lets out a sigh before turning around, hands on her hips. She let out a breath, trying to calm herself down, even if the stress was boiling over in her mind. Could you magic your guy over here so we can get this journey done faster?
Oh, I'm not sure. That might pop a hole in reality.
Lucian and Michaela whip their heads around to look at him in bewilderment. Even Camellia can't help but stare as he begins to stroke his chin, thinking to himself. His door then immediately pops open.
Well, I don't know if I don't try.
Or we could just go to the next town.
There is a town nearby, right?
He pauses. He then slaps his hand on the door, closing it shut. He jogs over, catching up to the three of them.
That's a much better idea. I mentioned that the next town's Cosper, right?
Yep. Is it far away?
Well, usually it is, but I know a shortcut.
The wooden boy points into the distance, towards the hill covered in stakes.
Over those hills, you go through a grove, right? Then a bit further, there's Cospera.
Huh. That's helpful. With that, the blonde pats him on the head lightly. Thanks, Keie. You're doing a good job.
I sure hope I am. It is what I'm made for.
Further behind, Camellia watches, crossing her arms slowly. She lingers back as the three walk forward, before slowly following ahead, walking over the hills with a leisurely gait. Now that she was further away, she finally had time to observe her surroundings. The sky was odd, to say the least. It was a slight dusk purple, with orange and pink hues showing the sunset. The moon was beginning to rise overhead, but it was dim, almost as if there was a sheet over it. On the hill, the stakes were marked with flowers, while others were left unmarked. But all of them had dyed hemp rope tied around their tops. After looking at them for a moment, she gazed up to see a field of flowers surrounding the stakes. Keie? These aren't graves, are they?
Oh, no. Tobias struggles to remember things sometimes, so he just puts these in as reminders.
Well, you know more than me, I guess. She walks forward, brushing through the field of flowers to get to her friends. Though she can't get the image out of her head, she lets out a soft sigh. I hardly know anything about Tobias. Is he anything like you?
No. He's quiet. Like I said, he's really calm, creative, introspective. But sometimes my brother just doesn't have a really good grasp on how things work. I suppose that's a good way to put it. I try to protect him.
As he explains, Camellia's gaze softens. In front of her, it was like he was a completely different person. The suspicion still in her heart was beginning to melt away.
Sometimes I'm not really good at it, though.
It's okay. Keie slowly looks up towards her, but finds that her gaze is firmly fixed on Lucian, who is being held back from inspecting the flowers. She lets out a small chuckle. For once, I feel like I kind of understand. Camellia turns back to look at Keie and finds that he's smiling at her. She scratches behind her ribbon, eyes darting away as she realizes she'd been a bit too vulnerable with the wooden boy. The two make their way into the tree grove along with the rest of the group. Camellia looks down to see Lucian curiously looking at the plants. bending over and picking up a few and putting them in his pocket. Luca, what are you doing?
I think these are medicinal. They smell kind of, antidote-y. I figured I should pick up some, just in case we run into trouble, you know?
Oh! This grove is actually chock full of medicinal herbs. They kind of overgrew. We didn't really need them.
With that, Lucian picks up some dandelions and red clover, Michaela watching him like a hawk. Then she stops, beginning to stare off into the forest. Camellia looks at her friend, who is gazing into the dark with a serious expression. Mika? Suddenly, Michaela grabs Lucian's hand as he reaches out towards an unseen plant. Don't you dare pick that. It's wolfsbane.
I didn't know.
Michaela lets go of his hand and gives him a reassuring pat. She helps him up, offering him some mint instead. Camellia and Keie look on, offering each other sympathetic glances before moving forward through the grove. There was a gate in front of them, made out of molded trees, providing a clearing out into the village. The late dusk moon shined overhead. The town was small, sand covering the ground. Within that sand, there was a mix of loamy soil and pebbles, which made the dark houses of stone and wood stand out on the ground. Some were built on hills, while others were in the side of the town's path. Crickets sang from the forest, the silver of the moon overhead, casting the town in an eerie glow. Michaela furrowed her brows, looking around curiously. Stalls were unmanned, simply standing there in the stale air. The moonshine highlighting their wooden structure like halo light. There was fruit in the stalls, still ripe, but no sellers to be seen. Michaela frowned, turning towards Keie.
This is it, right?
Yes! It's pretty, isn't it?
It's deserted. Keie's smile falters as he purses his lips. Both women look around. Camellia more uneasy than curious, while Michaela looked apprehensive. Lucian lingered behind.
Maybe everyone's out?
That doesn't seem likely. Shouldn't night market be happening right now?
What do you mean deserted?
The rest turned to look at him, Lucian curious. The wooden boy looks between the three of them.
Tobias and I are the only ones that live on the island.
You're not serious, right?
Well, I guess there's animals, and of course the plants. But Tobias and I are truly the only people here.
Camellia looks at him with doubt, then shrugs. Keie knows better than her, after all. Though she notices that Michaela is still looking around, her eyebrows furrowed and lips pursed as she clenches her fists at her side. Are you okay?
I'm okay. Just thinking.
Maybe we should rest after traveling for so long. We can sleep in one of the houses.
That's a great idea. I mean, you all must be exhausted.
I am kind of tired.
However, Camellia just narrows her eyes with concern at Michaela, who was gazing far off into the distance, as if she'd seen a ghost. The moonlight was beginning to grow brighter as the moon rose further in the sky. The maid turned towards a house and opened the door slowly. With that, they all entered, seeing just how small it was. It was also quite medieval. An unlit hearth, a kitchen with copper cooking supplies, a low table and cushions, and 2 bedrooms off to the side. Keie, can you spawn some... The wooden boy was already spotting food for the meal, setting up a pot over the fire and filling it with stock. The younger Di Perenne walked over to stare at what he was doing, the boy seemingly entranced in making the food. The maid put her hands on her hips, puffing a strand of hair out of her face.
He's literally stealing my job.
Well, as I keep saying, you could afford to take a break once in a while.
Instead of responding, Michaela walked into the bedroom, leaving her friend behind. Camellia frowned, looking over at the two young men before gradually making her way over to Michaela. The woman stands at the window, looking out towards the rising moon. Camellia came up behind her. You know what? If you're going to mope, at least let me reset your braid, just like old days. The maid grumbled out a response, to which Camellia frowned, beginning to undo the woman's hair. She traced her fingers through it, getting out the knots that had formed from the stress of travel. You don't have to do this. I know you're angry at me. Oh yeah, I'm still pissed. But I have better things to worry about. Like Lucian, our new dubious little friend. And last but certainly not least, you. With that, she tugs out another knot gently. Michaela simply looks at the windowsill. Duck, you really should be angry with me right now. I was doing it again. I was thinking about myself, not what you wanted. I know it's an old habit. As the maid continues to ramble, Camellia brushes through her hair, then begins tying it into a braid, holding her hair together gently. Please, just get angry at me. Say something, anything. I'm not going to. I know you're just trying to avoid what you're really worried about. Camellia gently puts the hairband in. What's really wrong, Columbina? I'll be honest. I'm just on edge. This place gives me the creeps. Camellia is quiet as she listens to her. Michaela cradles her arms closed, inhaling as she shivers, as if a cold draft entered the room. Even if we're alone, it doesn't feel like it. And whatever is with us doesn't feel alive. Like a ghost? Come on, you know the dead can't leave Nile. No, not like that. It's the feeling that there's a false life. Something uncanny.
Dinner's ready!
Both girls jolt, startled. With a sigh, they give each other a gentle hug before finally joining the two boys in the kitchen. Lucian looks utterly beside himself at the meal, gaping in awe at it. This looks so good! What is it? She looks down in the bowl, finding a thick, warm lamb stew with a healthy helping of potatoes, cabbage, onions, and carrots. There was a cute parsley side garnish nestled next to a few carrots resting on the top. She was astounded that the young man was able to whip up something so hearty.
It's called cawl Cymreig.
What? Huh?
Yup, it's a traditional Calfosian dish. We often use it to get warm in the winter.
Isn't it spring, though?
Keie opens his mouth enthusiastically, then closes it immediately. He puts a finger to his chin.
You know, I didn't really think about it. However, it is quite a cold night tonight, so I guess it serves its purpose.
The three of them begin to eat, the moon being the only light in the room. As they finish, Keie picks up the plates, putting them in his drawer and getting rid of them. Michaela lets out a small, dejected sigh, realizing she probably can't clean.
I think I'm gonna turn in.
Lucian says this and then begins to shuffle through his bag, bringing out a leather-bound journal.
I want to get to documenting this journey right away.
Before Camellia can ask what he means, he runs off into the second room, giggling as he goes. With that, she chuckles, shaking her head. The wooden boy nearby purses his lips, then looks to the two women curiously.
I know this is an odd question, but I only really have my brother. What are people like out there to each other? You all seem nice enough, but in all honesty, I haven't talked to anyone else other than Tobias.
The young noble inhales sharply, then looks over at Michaela, who is just as stumped on the question. It's complicated. Michaela nods at her answer, fiddling with her braid absent-mindedly as she tries to figure out what else to say. There are certain things going on right now that make it hard to answer. The boy looks at the two of them with confusion. Finally, Camellia lets out a sigh. How much do you know about the Herald of Creation? The Herald of... The two friends share a look, grimacing at each other. Maybe it's best you don't know. We need to go to sleep anyways. After a moment of confusion, Keie slowly nods. He gives the two of them a shaky smile.
Well, good night then. I hope you wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning.
They smile at him before making their way across the house, entering the larger bedroom and quietly shutting the door behind them. Michaela stands against the door, letting out a sigh of relief, but Camellia stares at the ground in guilt. Should we have kept that from Keie?
We can talk about it later with him. You should be thinking about yourself right now, and telling him would just complicate things.
The two of them climb into the bed, Michaela facing away from Camellia with their backs touching. I don't want to expose him to my nonsense, you know? He just seems so... I know I didn't trust him, but...
I get it. You didn't trust him, but now you do?
Well, it's not that I trust him now, it's just, well, he's, you know, but he's...
Duck, it's okay. And by the way, nonsense is not what this is, and you know that.
Ugh! She pulls the blanket over herself, burying her body under the covers, to explain to him who the Herald is, who my father is. I mean, just the fact he doesn't know. That's... I don't want to screw this up.
You can't control everything in the world, you know.
With a muffled groan, she pouts into the blanket, then slowly drags it away from Michaela. And for that you get no blanket, Miss Klein. Good night. Oh, come on, don't be a child about this. Good night, Michaela. With that, Michaela wrestles the blanket from her, the two of them struggling against each other for it and laughing. Somewhere far away, in the hills of Calphos, a white rose glowing with gold blooms, clawing from the dirt with its thorny tendrils, like worms crawling from the earth. From it, a golden ichor drips, shimmering onto the grass, and slowly beginning to rot it like winter's frost. In her ear, she hears whispers, cacophonous, horrible, scornful, dripping with malice. Phrases overlay with one another before settling on their agreement. Camelia's eyes snapped open, cold sweat dripping down her face. She slowly turned to look at Michaela, who had apparently won their wrestling contest last night. She was cradling the blanket close, snoring into it lightly as she slept. Camellia bent down and gently kissed the woman on the forehead, then got out of bed to stretch. She then frowned. On the windowsill, attached to nothing but a vine, was a bleach-white rose stained with gold. Camellia walked over to pick it, but as soon as she did, it shriveled up and wilted, falling on the floor in ashes. The vines crawled away, slowly, creepingly. The woman backs away and turns towards Michaela, unsure if she should wake her up. She didn't know what to do. After they finally set out on their journey and evening came, they decided to take a break, all of them exhausted for some reason or the other. Camellia sits on the side of the road, second-guessing herself as she thought of what to say. Keie had made them lunch in their break. What he'd given her was a sandwich with neatly sliced ham, lettuce, cheese, and tomato. She barely touched it, pecking at its contents gradually while staring off into the distance. In her peripheral, she sees Michaela looking at her with a complex expression. Neither of them had uttered a word on the entire walk. Nearby, the wooden boy tends to a soft fire, humming a quiet song to himself. Camellia glances over at Lucian, who was excitedly taking notes in his journal.
So you say that flowers are important to Kalphos. What other things do you do with your brother on the island?
We tend a small field of crops. I do woodwork sometimes and make furniture.
Fascinating! Kalphosian culture is truly amazing. I hope you don't mind that I'm writing about the journey, Keie. I just want something to share when I get home.
Upon hearing this, Keie perks up, then frowns slightly.
I won't mind.
After saying that, he hesitates. Lucian looks at him, furrowing his brows as he puts down his journal.
What's wrong?
Keie continues poking at the fire, muttering to himself.
Did I do something?
No. I haven't been here for a bit, okay? Tobias and I fought before I fell off Kalphos. And it was because he wanted to keep Kalphos a secret. He told me other people were outside, and
as he looks into the fire, it glints in his eyes. He then spawns a glass of water, pouring it into the fire as it sizzles out.
I didn't agree with him. I thought he needed company. But now that I'm back, I'm not sure having information about this place out there is such a good idea. But people could really use this information. If your brother is as powerful... I don't want him to get hurt if things are complicated.
Lucian opens his mouth to shoot back another retort, but Camellia glares at him, her gaze stern. Lucian, he doesn't want to talk about it. Stop trying to argue. Lucian glares back at her, then shuts his journal and gets up. He stalks off, ears pinned back to his head with stress. His sister simply looks at Keie. The wooden doll was staring straight at his hands. He jolted as Michaela walked up and pat him on the shoulder.
It's okay. He's just going through a rough time. He's not actually irritated with you.
Yeah, but that doesn't give him the right. I'm going to talk to him. She stands up, looking down at Keie with sympathy, seeing just how sad he looked. Her heart ached, remembering the arguments she'd had with her own brother. With that, the woman bends down, bringing him into a hug. Don't worry. I know I said I didn't trust you, but... She hesitates. Then she continued. This time her heart swelled with sincerity. I know now that I was wrong. I want you to see that. After a moment of silence, Keie begins to tear up, liquid sap running down his carved-up cheeks. He hugs her back.
Thank you, Camellia. I really needed that.
She smiles, beginning to gently let go of him before getting up and trudging down the path towards the direction that Lucian went. She walked next to a babbling brook, seeing footsteps in the mud and following them. Lucian! Lucian! After 10 minutes of walking and calling out his name, she paused, hearing the sound of a flute on the wind. She furrows her brows, the sound of a trumpet, violin, and lute soon following. Turning towards the sound, she follows it, to see a long road filled with people dancing merry in the sunlight. They wear old Renaissance outfits, musicians leading the band of the parade. On a float sits Lucian in a chair. someone putting a crown on his head. He's nervous, but seems almost elated at this. Camellia stands, horrified, seeing the dancers waltz around the float.
Join the parade of infinite delight, so don't delay, grant a wish you just might. Anything you wish, anything you ask, he can grant just any task.
Lucian, get down from there!
Oh, Camellia!
A villager puts a basket of grapes in his lap.
Isn't this cool?
No, it's not! Remember, this island was supposed to be—
The parade gets closer, a lute player nearly knocking her over. When the parade members spot her, they pull her into the crowd, pushing her into a waltz with a dancer. He struggles out of their grasp, then joins Lucian on the float. He opens his mouth, about to eat a grape, but she quickly smacks it out of his hand.
Chikatsu, are you a fucking idiot?
Lucian shrinks back.
He said this island was deserted.
Well, Keie's been wrong before.
He's been wrong? Look at you! You sound just like Dad!
Her younger brother looks at her like he's been kicked, dropping the bowl of grapes onto the ground. Tears stream down his cheeks as he looks at her with fury.
I sound like Dad? Well, at least you have a mother to sound like. I have nothing but him.
The parade lurches to a halt. Two siblings falling forward due to inertia, staring up with confusion.
And now, for the main event, which we hope will please our star.
From underneath the float, the villagers pull out the same figure she'd seen in the maze's statue. A wooden effigy of a man with long hair. He looks horrified this time, practically catatonic.
An effigy of the heretic. We hope you will finally join us, as it should be.
The villagers clap as the siblings look over in fear, suddenly realizing the zealotry they'd walked into. In the distance, they can see the camp, where Keie is looking to them with horror, and his eyes settle on the wooden sculpture. He sees the villagers produce a burning torch, lighting it at the kindling on the statue's feet. Keie stands up, shouting at the top of his lungs,
No!
And like magic, the people disappear, the two siblings dropping to the ground, horrified at what they just witnessed. Lucian hyperventilates, slowly removing the crown from his head. And Keie just stands there, heavily breathing as he looks over at them. The daughter of the Perenne hesitates, looking at Lucian once before going to Keie and comforting him. Michaela stares on before bending down to join her. Meanwhile, the youngest brother watches on in unease, ears lowering as his eyes widen. In a fit, he throws the crown to the ground before walking far from the camp. Camellia puts her jacket on the wooden boy's shoulders, who cradles his knees close.
I'm sorry. I should know what's going on, but I don't.
The boy sniffles, sap beginning to come out of his wooden eye ducts again. The two girls look at each other. What would they even say in such a situation? They never experienced anything like this before, and clearly he hasn't either.
I don't know how it could have changed so much when I was gone. How long was I even gone? I don't know anymore.
Maybe you could ask Tobias when you see him.
That's my worry. He doesn't take care of himself when I'm not around. I should have protected him. I failed because I felt I knew better. I need to stop doing that.
You sound like you really care about him.
He's all I have right now.
Camellia feels a lump in her throat. She stares at the ground, biting her lip. But you also have yourself. And in order to help him, you need to take care of you too, okay? Her best friend looks over at her, eyes softening. She takes her hand, squeezing it gently.
But I don't really need to do human stuff. Sure you can. I mean, do you have any hobbies? That's a human thing?
Yeah, it is. For example, I like making medicine. And Camellia likes painting.
Hey, you know I don't make art anymore.
Well, tell that to the sketches I find in the history book margins.
Wait, you're a painter? I dabble in it, but I hardly call myself a painter. Tobias also paints, and he's so talented. I used to watch him paint all day. If I know anything about you, your drawings are probably amazing. You know so much, and you have such an eye for detail.
Camelia's heart swells at this. She suddenly brings him into a tight hug, squeezing him close.
Ow, 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 oops. Sorry.
She lets him go.
I guess I'm just over emotional from today, and I guess what you said just sparked something in me.
As she begins saying this, Lucian walks back into the camp. Overhearing what she's saying, he pauses, waiting for her to continue, his ears drooping low. Sometimes I wish I had a better relationship with Lucian. I don't think I'll ever fully understand what he's going through, and I'm not sure he wants me to. Upon hearing this, Lucian walks away, covering his ears. I just wish he knew that I love him.
Oh, I'm sure he knows. He is your brother after all.
Camellia frowns, looking down as she remembers the amount of hate that was in his voice earlier. I hope so.
Anyways, how about those hobbies? Oh, I love to cook, clean, make furniture, cook. Wait, I already said that.
Later that evening, the group walks more. The journey was silent. Nothing odd has popped up. In fact, it was quite peaceful. The breeze was low, warm, just like any spring breeze would be. The flora waved beautifully through each blow of the wind. White and yellow daisies, sparsely tinted with yellow roses. Camellia lets herself falter for a moment, looking behind her to see that Lucian is lagging behind, his shoes dragging in the dirt. She turns back to talk to him.
Hey, Luca?
Instead of responding, he just walks past her, moving to the front. With that, she slows, standing in his wake. She comes to stare at the ground, a lump in her throat forming before she shrugs it off, letting out a breath and continuing to walk.